All right. Welcome back to the Command Your Brand Show. I am your host, Josh Silvestro, brand ambassador of Command Your Brands. So in this episode, I actually have a very, very interesting guest speaker, as I never say. And this is actually a really cool one because, I've grown up in my family, have been involved with the music industry, and I've had a lot of people like my father who plays guitar and was in the band. And this person actually I've known his name for many years, but I've never actually talked to him till today. And he's a very special person that I would love to talk to. He's actually a CEO founder of his own media company. He's a rock star. He plays guitar. He's a musician. He's actually done a program actually called you have to remind me what it's called. It's called the school. It's not, I say School of Rock, but it's called the
Rock for Human Rights.
Rock for Human Rights.
Yeah.
And, he's just an incredible human being. So I'd like to definitely introduce you guys to Wil Seabrook. So Wil, thanks for joining the show, man.
Of course. My pleasure.
Yeah.
Nice to chat with you.
Yeah. So I guess what I want to kind of ask first. So for people who don't know who you are, obviously, since I've seen you on TV and kind of know who you are, could you kind of give us a little bit about yourself and your background and kind of why you went into the industry you are in today?
Yeah, well, I sort of joke with people, I've Forrest Gumped my way into all of this. So I think it was John Lennon who said, life is what happens while you're making other plans.
Yeah.
And so I made music for a living, as you said, a million years ago. I had a deal with Warner Brothers and toured and played with big bands and was on TV and radio. And I've had my music in over 150 TV shows and movies and things like that. That's been fun.
Yeah.
And so I kind of did everything I wanted to do except really break through. Like I didn't have a top 10 hit and that kind of thing, but I really had some amazing adventures. And then when my son was born, I sort of took time off to be with him and my wife, just kind of by accident, and then got involved. One thing led to another. And now for 16 years, I've had creative agencies. So we do mainly video, and we even sort of fell into that by accident back in the day, just at the very sort of dawn of online video. So I kind of rode that wave, and 16 years and 8,000 projects later, I help people explain things, whether it's a commercial or training or whatever it is. It's really fun. I really enjoy helping people make good decisions, be better at their jobs, et cetera. So it's really fun for me to take big, complex ideas and really sort of distill them down and help people understand them more easily. I find that really interesting.
It's kind of funny that you mentioned that. Like I'm a very big, I wouldn't say I'm a YouTube kid, but I'm like a YouTube kid that I kind of watched YouTube a lot when I was younger. And even today, we kind of all watch it. And, you're kind of introduced these new subjects, and sometimes a lot of people, when they make these videos, they kind of make the mistake of they give so much, like, words that they don't fully understand or things that just doesn't make sense. Like, what do you find when they're making a commercial or like things that like you want to promote yourself or maybe like the area that you work in? Like, I get an example, like let's say health, like in healthcare or like in taxes or whatever. Like, what do you think would help people to kind of understand those subjects more in the video? Because I know people have a hard time making videos that make it kind of more simple. Like, what's your take on that?
Right. Well, what I have found far and above and beyond anything else is that an effective message is the foundation on which everything else is built. And sometimes you really do need super high quality professional content in terms of how it's produced, how it looks, how it sounds, et cetera. But increasingly in this day and age, all bets are off. Some of the biggest brands of the world are doing the most raw, just selfie, things go viral that have no production quality whatsoever.
Yeah.
But the thing that we work with clients on, that we tell people and that we obsess about, is really put yourself in the shoes of the exact ideal audience that you're trying to reach. So if it's a consumer, even if it's a big, broad consumer product like toothpaste, who buys more toothpaste? Is it mom or is it the teenager or is it dad? It's usually mom, right? Probably, right? And why is she buying it and what does she care about? And make it very human in terms of don't try to manipulate people, don't talk down to people or don't talk up to people trying to sound smart or complicated or complex or sophisticated. Speak as clearly and as succinctly and as plainly as you can, but only speak to the needs of your perfect ideal audience. It doesn't have to make sense to anybody else. Most businesses do not have viral content, does not translate financially. Sometimes it does.
Yeah.
but there's not a direct correlation typically. You can have lots of viral content that does not translate into business in the door. So the most important thing you can do when you're creating a video is who's going to watch this? What do we want them to get out of it? And what do we want them to do? What is the call to action?
Right.
And then what do we hope that they themselves get out of it? How can I be helpful to them? How can I speak to their needs?
Yeah.
So when I talk to clients, I say, it's not about you. It's not about you. It's not about your company. It's not about your product. It's not about your service. It's about your audience and your ability to help them solve a problem. So if you articulate that problem to them, they're nodding their head and saying, yeah, that is my problem. And you immediately get their attention. And then you briefly go into, and I have a solution, and you're going to want to hear more about it. You want to create that itch that they just cannot help but say, oh, you got me. And everybody's had that experience, whether it's online with a TV ad or on Instagram or whatever, where they just, you got me. You got me. All right, fine. I'll click. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some commercial, like I know some companies kind of do this where like they either hit or they miss. Like they kind of hit it right on the ballpark, and some people just say, you know what? They just totally missed it. Like I kind of look at an example as like the Super Bowl ads. Like you look at those Super Bowl ads, like they're like the most watched ads of all time, and it's like the really stupidest ones. It's like I remember one year there was like this commercial with Reese's, and it was like, you know, oh, do you live under a rock? And literally it was someone living under a rock. You know what I mean? Like there's like some weird, some people hit it really often. It's kind of funny and it makes you want to pay for the product or the services. But like some of sometimes the message isn't quite there. And I guess like, how would you know to draft the right message? Because some people like, oh, I want to say this, but maybe what this is may not be quite clearly defined. Like, how would you draft a message, do you think?
Yeah. I mean, we have our secret sauce. We have a questionnaire that we send, and we modify it slightly depending on the use case. Like a TV commercial is completely different than a company overview, or like a trade show video that's up on a screen in some big, crowded, loud room. Right. That's obviously very different communication. So understanding the audience, understanding the use case, like the context and where it's going to be seen.
Yeah.
And then again, just ask yourself, who is the audience for this? What do I want them to take away? What's going to be most helpful to them? And what is the problem that I'm solving for them? And keep it as short and as direct as you possibly can. Be brutal with yourself. I typically write a draft however long it is. So I don't think about the word count. I just write and communicate. Then I start thinking about the word count, and I start just grabbing the red pen and slashing and burning and saying, how can I reduce it down more? And you basically want to get it as short as you possibly can without losing fundamental points of your value proposition, right? So if you solve three things beautifully, you don't want to make it so short that you leave out one of those things, because it might be the third thing that gets them interested and wanting to talk to you, right?
Right.
But you don't want to drone on, and you don't want to assume everybody's in defensive mode nowadays because we're all drinking from the same fire hose of information.
Right.
And so it's not selfish, it's self-preservation. We cannot consume it all. We cannot pay attention to everything, or we never get anything done, right?
Yeah.
So people's guard is up, their blinders are up. You've got to hook their attention immediately. You've got to keep it until the end and just be really respectful to the audience. Yeah. Once you understand the audience and their needs, then think about them like a human being. If I were that person with that need, what would I want to hear? What would someone say to me where I'd be nodding my head and saying, you don't want them saying, oh my God, that was so funny, I'm going to share that with my friends. You want them saying, I need that. Where, what do I do? What's the website? Where do I click? That's the response that you're trying to create.
Right. You want the right effect for the right commercial or the right actual message you're bringing. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Do you think it sort of applies to, because like, you know, like as you and I both know, like everyone around the world is on social media of like either Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever type of social media stuff. And, you know, obviously someone watching a commercial on TV may be different from someone watching on social media. You know, like, do you find it's a different message completely when they go into social media compared to like a commercial from like a television show or like a TV series or anything like that?
It's not so much that the fundamental message isn't necessarily different, but the way that it's put together varies for sure. And the thing is, the lines are blurring much, much, much more. And we say to people now, like 10 years ago, you needed an explainer video for your homepage. 5 years ago, you needed your explainer video plus several more product videos, things like that, just like this little mini ecosystem of content. Now you need an endless amount of content all the time. You basically need to create a little production company within your organization, or you need to outsource it to people that you trust who know what they're doing. And that's where an agency like mine comes in, right? We can help with strategy and execution. And you can, we sort of work for our clients like a fractional CFO. We're a fractional creative team, right? They hire us and we come in and we do that. And I've got 50 people behind me who are amazing at what they do. So we come in and we understand and we know all the right questions to ask the audience, the problem, how you're solving it, et cetera. And then you create content. So it's like a when in Rome thing. A video that works as a reel on Instagram or TikTok might have the same basic value proposition that you're communicating in terms of the problem and the solution, but the way it gets communicated, even just the simple things like vertical versus horizontal format, the length of the video, things like that, are just different. So putting something on LinkedIn is not the same thing as putting it on Instagram, et cetera.
Yeah. I know for me, like, I do post contents for like the company that I work for. And it's kind of funny is like, I find it so hard to keep up and try to keep track of how many times I posted a week on just Facebook and like Instagram and LinkedIn. And then you got like TikTok now. And it's like all these other views and angles of things. And like, for people like, a lot of CEOs and founders aren't my age. Maybe they might be older, sometimes even way older than I am. So like for them who are not even familiar with a lot of the juice of social media, like what do you find is the easiest and most effective way to promote it in a message with media?
Understanding the audience and the problem and the solution and staying consistent. And then in my experience with social media, there are different layers of things. So at the very sort of top of the funnel, you're not an expert with people because they don't know who you are yet. Right. And so fundamentally, you want to communicate observations, things that the average person, or especially your audience, will nod their head and say, that's true. So in my experience, yeah, that makes sense, right? Yeah. You want to share your own experiences, your own things that you've seen to be valuable. There's more humility at the top of the funnel, if that makes sense, right? In terms of how you're communicating ideas. Once people are hooked and they're starting to follow you and you're starting to sort of gain some altitude with them in terms of thought leadership, then you can start leaning in a little bit and saying, okay, in I've done 8,000 projects in 16 years. I've done it for Fortune 50 companies. I've done it for nonprofits and startups. I've seen some patterns. I've seen what's workable. We have case studies. I know a little bit what I'm talking about. Yeah. You can dig in a little bit more on that. And then when you really get deep in, if you've got the time and bandwidth and someone's willing to commit to it, you can do long form podcasts and tutorial videos and things like that. But you've got to kind of build up. You got to fill up the top of the funnel. And that's the good news, is that the top of the funnel content tends to be shorter, simpler, more observational, a little bit lighter. And it's easier to do that in volume, which is really what you need to do initially. Yeah.
Part of also is interesting too, is like, with social media, sort of like, I'll give an example. It's sort of like you have a dentist and he's kind of like, well, my people are everybody, who need to get their teeth cleaned. But it's like, how do you actually isolate who your actual, because sometimes people don't know how to actually isolate, niche down their audience of people. And sometimes, I forget who told me this, but it's just the action of just getting some agreement and seeing how many people agree with you. Actually, you'll find your audience through that is the agreement factor of what you put out. So I find that very interesting what you mentioned that,
Yeah. And also communicating things that are true and helpful. And I just find from any business standpoint, communicating value, you want someone to, it needs to be entertaining in the sense that it's got to be information that they find relevant and helpful and just fundamentally interesting, right? And there are things that, like when I go to see my dentist, they'll just throw out little pieces of information like, I didn't know that, I'm halfway through my life and I made it this far and I just didn't know that was true, right? Yeah. And so sharing fundamental things that would be helpful to people, they just really appreciate that. And it starts establishing you as someone that they can come to for interesting, helpful, truthful information. Mm-hmm. So just keeping it very simple. And again, what would you want to hear that you would find compelling? And AI tools now like ChatGPT and things like that, you can go in I wouldn't necessarily trust it to write all the content for you because it can get repetitive and sound robotic, but it can certainly give you ideas for content. Like you learn to prompt it properly, and it'll just help spark ideas, because anyone who does creative stuff will tell you it's 1,000 times easier to edit an idea or riff off of an idea than start with a blank page with a blinking cursor. Like, what should we do? I don't know.
Yeah.
That just, you get analysis paralysis, right? You're just thinking and thinking and thinking. But if you could just start spitballing ideas and throwing things against the wall, it makes it fun and interesting, because it is fun to communicate.
Totally. That's totally true, man. And it is fun. And for me, like, I've never been, when I was younger, I was never the most like person who just likes to talk very much, until like very recently. I'm like, I want to just talk and speak my mind. You know what really grinds my gears? Just kidding. But what's funny is, I know, and like we kind of talked about this earlier, where people who kind of don't understand that this world of social media and content creation and just making a product about you and delivering that product. What do you find? Because you obviously have had clients enough to where their mistakes, where their flaws are, where obviously you don't have to give me those people who they are and what they are, what those mistakes are. But what do you find are like the top mistakes people do in actual media, and like what they should be doing instead?
Well, the number one thing I would say that virtually almost all businesses deal with is they massively underestimate the amount of communication and promotion that they need to be putting out there. And they sort of make excuses. And all the creative teams that I'm aware of, we deal with mainly the larger corporate clients, but I've done videos and creative projects for everybody, little mom and pop shops, and we do nonprofit things and pro bono stuff. So I've seen it at all levels of organizations. But the cobbler's children never have shoes. Like, if it's the in-house creative team job to also do their social content and stuff, it's just not happening. And so they just massively underestimate the amount of content and communication that you need to be putting out there on a regular basis.
Right.
The other thing I would say is that people just make things too complicated, too complex, and they're trying to communicate too much, too many thoughts, too many ideas. And they just don't get it done. It never gets across the finish line, because you're trying to get internal approvals, and this stakeholder needs to see it, and everybody's got an opinion, and it just doesn't get across the finish line. And if it does, they're trying to solve world hunger with one video, right? Or communicate every bit of their value proposition as a $3 billion company. It's like, it's not going to work, guys. You got to calm down here and just do it one communication, one thought, one concept at a time. I think people don't do that enough, because they think, okay, we're going to make one video or 5 videos and then we're done for the year. And it's like, that's not a winning strategy.
Yeah. Like, it's funny is like, there's just some things you find that you wouldn't think about it, but it kind of just happens, where like someone's post something and it's just like a viral video, and like just makes it so, because either it was the message was so impactful. Like, I looked at some of the musical things that during COVID, like if you remember, like there was like a whole concert that happened online. It was like, it just blew up because it was something really nice, and it was kind of like non-scary, because everyone at the time was just like kind of freaked out about what was happening with the world. And like, it really is just, it promoted a message of smiling more and just like being cheerful about things, and like, don't worry about what's happening around you. Just focus on what's all about life, it's just creating joy, So like, I think you're correct in terms of like creating the right message and actually what you're doing. And businesses, I think, have the hardest time is just how do I create a message for myself? Like, what is the key things to actually make that message go right for myself in my own business? So what do you find? Like, how would someone create their own, like, let's say they're a new business, or even they're like a business that's been around, but they're struggling because they can't really figure out who their audience or their type of people are, because they're kind of very general. How would you say, like, what should someone do in terms of getting their message out? It's like just even something simple.
I think it's very important as an entrepreneur and a business owner, you're going out and doing something that almost nobody else has the courage to do. If you look at the number of, first of all, small business is the backbone of the U.S. economy, which is the biggest and strongest economy in the world. It is small businesses and small business owners. So pat yourself on the back, first of all, constantly, and be willing to epically fail and skin your knees and bloody your lip and fall down and scrape every, break an ankle here and there, and just keep getting up and pushing yourself forward. And don't make yourself wrong for going through that, because it can be very daunting. And the voices inside your head saying, give up, you're a quitter, you're never going to, you bit off more than you could chew. Everybody goes through that, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just important, because you see people's successes, you see the end product of the arc of someone's career, and it looks like smooth, it looks like it's going like that. And really it's going like that, right?
Yeah.
Just all over the place all the time. So be willing to just fail and fail and fail and fail and get up again and again. Articulate from the very beginning who your ideal audience is. If you're a dentist, I understand that you want to deal with everybody, but who's your favorite person to do dental care for? Do you love kids? You have such natural affinity. Every time you see a young kid or a baby or something, you just want to talk to them, and you just find them, they're the cutest thing ever. And you're maybe unusually patient and steady as a person in terms of your personality. Maybe you need to look at being targeting more as a pediatric dentist and build your whole practice around that, because from your branding to promotion to everything about it, that's very, very different than a cosmetic dentist who does very high-end, very expensive work, who takes people who have just massive problems with their mouths, just every way you can think of, health problems, et cetera, and gives them beautiful, gorgeous looking, but also smiles, but also very healthy mouths and things, right? There's a whole tech to that. And those two things are very, very different businesses, very different branding, very different messaging, very different audience, very different life experience for those two people. Just having an appointment, having a meeting is very different when you're giving a 6-year-old their first cleaning or whatever, versus someone who's 60 years old who finally wants implants or whatever, and it's a huge expense and they're worried about that, and it's sedated or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so think about that. I'm a huge believer in articulating the ideal scenario of something, sort of an ideal scene. This is how if I could wave a magic wand, here's exactly what my business would look like. Here's how much money it would gross per year. Here's how much I'd be taking home. Here's my ideal. They're just coming in droves. There's a waiting list. People are taking a ticket and the line's out the door. Who are those people? Who would you rather be dealing with than anybody else?
Right.
Especially if you're just starting out, go for it, right? You may find as you begin to market and put things out, messaging out in the world, that just naturally in your area or what people gravitate to, it may turn into something else over time based on who comes in the door and who responds. But at the very least, start the journey with a star high goal of this is who I'm going to be and this is what I'm going to do. And then if it be willing to pivot and observe what's going on in front of you. And if something is successful, do more of it. And if it's not successful, knock it off, right?
Yeah.
But begin by articulating your ideal audience and just everything about this is how it will go. And then work your way backward from there. Well, what's the step right before that? What would I have to have in place right before that magical scene appeared? And then what's the step before that? And the step before that? And if you keep doing that, you can work your way back. You can fill in the entire distance between that ideal scenario, your dream job, your dream business, and where you are right now. And you come up with a step. But if you try to start here and blindly move forward, trying to find a path that, and you don't know even which direction to start walking in, what are the odds that you're going to get there? Right. You don't, when you use a map app, whether it's Google Maps, Apple Maps, whatever, you don't start by saying, I want to get somewhere, but I'm not sure where. You type in the address. That's how you get there.
Yeah.
And then it gives you 4 different paths, depending, do you want to pay a toll? Do you want to get there fast? Do you want to take the scenic route? But you begin the journey by articulating the destination. And that's what makes it a journey, as opposed to just wandering through the wilderness, stumbling around.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, like how you just put that was just, it's like, where are people going? Like, and it's actually, I think just when you make content, you'll figure it out as you go. Like you don't, it's okay to make mistakes because like everyone makes mistakes in something, you know what I mean? So I think that's really cool. And I kind of want to go into your company a little bit because I know we're kind of coming a little short here. But I would love to talk about you and your company and like, you know, I guess like people who are people that work with you the most? Like what are people, like I know you mentioned like corporate type companies? Like, what are people who come to you? I guess that's my first question.
Yeah, well, we've been very fortunate. I've had quite a varied career. So I had a partner for 11 years on my first agency, and we really cut our teeth literally at the dawn of online video. Back when online video was terrible. It was like janky PowerPoints, bad music, bad voiceover, bad visuals. And we started creating these very simple videos, but the voiceovers were very friendly and just what you expect now. But at the time, it was kind of a novel concept.
Yeah.
And the scripts, the copywriting were really good. They were very direct and simple. It's what I've been describing, right? We articulated the problem. We spoke to the needs of that audience and said, if you'd like to hear more, reach out, right? Whatever the call to action was. And so we did thousands of videos like that. And then over time, the visuals became more complex, the market matured, et cetera. So mostly we work with Fortune 500 companies now. But also I love small businesses and I'm very partial to small businesses personally because I have such affinity for that because I have such personal reality on having that experience, right?
Yeah.
And the entrepreneur and owner struggle, the struggle is real. I say there are two kinds of people in the world. There are people who've had to make payroll and people who haven't had to make payroll. And it changes you. It changes your whole view of society, your ability to take responsibility for what's going on around you. It makes you pay more attention to government, to what's going on locally, nationally, et cetera. It really, it forces you to kind of lift your head up and understand national and regional trends and business trends and things like that in order to survive. So we deal with lots of different industries and verticals, and we make commercials, but we also do corporate overviews and testimonials, and those are really fun. We've done documentaries for major companies telling their company history and things like that. We also do a lot of corporate training, which I personally really love because corporate training generally is terrible. So boring. People are just clicking on the next thing, like make it stop. Like they're just like on, one hand on Instagram and just pressing the button, like multiple choice. All right, is it A? Nope. B? Nope. C? Okay, it's D. Great. Next. And they finished their training, but did not pay attention to any of it. Right.
Yeah.
And we've done stuff that's entertaining and fun and interesting, and people did it. They enjoyed it and they got better at their jobs. And I love helping people succeed, right? Yeah. Whether it's making the right decision for them or being better at their job or whatever it is.
That's cool. Yeah. It's such an interesting thing. Like when you have a media company, like you're just, and you kind of have the responsibility of like, okay, I got to take care of my people, but also like you have the outside world that you're also taking care of. So like it really lifts your responsibility and like you have to kind of, I forget who told me this, or I think I read it somewhere where, one of courage is like one of your most powerful tools, and you have to like really exercise it heavily because it just destroys you if you don't. You know what I mean? So it's kind of very fascinating how, like you mentioned, it just takes a lot of confront and effort just to really just get, payroll and just like we'll see what's kind of going on around the block. You know what I mean? So it's kind of interesting way you put about that.
Yeah, you get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yes.
I sort of decided about 3 years into business the first time, because I knew nothing about the industry before I started.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm either going to have a heart attack, like actually have a heart attack from stress, or I'm just going to decide to be okay with this. And I made an active decision to be comfortable being uncomfortable, sort of balancing on a razor's edge. Yeah. And as soon as I did that, I was completely fine. Yeah. And I sort of looked back on the previous 3 years of all this stress, and I realized the sun's always going to come up the next day. Anything can be negotiated. It's like the world is not going to end when you think it's going to end. And what you said about courage and being brave, courage is not the absence of fear, because any smart person who can read the room and understand what's going on and read the signals is right to be concerned if it's a dangerous environment. You need to be aware of that it's a dangerous environment. Otherwise, you're just going to walk into it and get yourself hurt or killed or whatever, right? So courage is not the absence of fear. It's persisting in spite of your fear and going on to affect whatever greatest good outcome you possibly can, given the barriers and given what's going on. And those are the people that I admire most, who are willing to be scared. I try to do things regularly that actively scare me, that intimidate me, because it's like, okay. Yeah. And I'm always better for it, because I find that if you don't confront something, it can just become this thing that just eclipses the sun and becomes this overwhelming thing. And the moment you confront it, it starts shrinking down and becoming manageable. And you look at exactly what it is, and you find 99% of the time, I can handle that. It's fine. Now I know what to do.
Right.
But that'll be okay. Probably. I'm not going to worry about that. That's when it eats you alive. Right?
Yeah. That's so interesting. I really like that perspective. Like if you don't confront it, it's just it actually grows and it creates this black eclipse for you, or even a black hole, it's like if you
a vortex that's sucking you in.
Exactly. Sucking the life out of you, so it's funny. Yeah. And I guess too, so because I know you've helped so many people just probably confront a lot of things that probably people didn't realize that was a problem for them. Can you I love you to talk to me about different successes that you've had in helping creating messages, or just your business has done something,
Well, I think if I have an Achilles heel, it's that I take things personally because I care a lot. I've always been that kind of person. I got into music because I wanted to save the world, make the world a better place. And I've taken a lot of things in business too personally. And that sounds like a humble brag or something. I really don't mean it that way. It actually has been problematic for me because I would make mistakes in not taking a step back and just really looking at it analytically. And just being able to make a sort of a dispassionate decision. Not that you don't care as a person. You have your values and your ethics and your personal standards, but you can just observe that something is what it is and it's not personal for you, right?
Yeah.
And so one thing is that sometimes I haven't always asked clients. I've been afraid to sort of ask about the outcome. Did that work out? Was it helpful to you? And lately, in the last couple of years, I've gotten much better about following up and saying, was that as helpful to you as we hoped?
Yeah.
And the funny part of it was incredibly helpful. We helped a client close $1 billion contract with a video series that we made for them. Another client, their cost per customer acquisition, they're a business to consumer company, so they're getting people to sign up for a service, and we brought their cost per individual customer acquisition down by 172%. Just with a couple of ads that we did for them. And so they were basically almost 200% more effective than anything they'd ever done before that. But until we asked them, they didn't think to tell us because it's not their job. Why? They're not worried about my company. They're not patting me on the back.
Right.
I know that they're happy when they come back and we do business again and again. But you can't take it for granted. You have to ask, and you have to be willing to take responsibility for what did and didn't work. And the ironic thing is that once I really started consistently asking, the news was way better than I thought it was going to be. I'm like, probably should have been asking before now.
Yeah.
So I have more case studies now than I've ever had. And that's part of the reason. So,
that's great, man. That's awesome. Awesome. Yeah. So I guess, because I know we're about to wrap up here. So I guess for people, because you've probably inspired me to kind of create more content. I think I got to get better at it, but just the action of just promoting a message, what is the message you're trying to bring? I think that's so important. So for people who want to kind of get to know you more and just maybe work with you in terms of your business and getting their message out and how they can actually do it, where's the best place they can reach out to you or your team, or however is the best way to contact you?
Sure. No, I really appreciate that. And I really do love to help people. So I will talk your head off. No obligation. I will not charge you for consulting. You'd be like, okay, thank you. I got a lot to think about. So feel free to reach out anytime. I love talking to people. My name is Wil Seabrook. It's Will with one L, which is a little unusual.
Yeah.
The simplest way to get a hold of us to start with, my website, if you go to expertcreativehelp.com. expertcreativehelp.com. That'll forward to our website, and you'll see the work that we do, and you can just fill out the contact form or call the phone number, and we will talk to you.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate the time. As your number one fan of rock and roll, which I'm a very huge fan of, and so is my father. My father's that's how I got into rock and roll. But I really appreciate your time, and I love asking these really interesting questions about media and how you operate and things like that. And I really love the conversation that we had. And of course, I thank everyone here who's listening to this and really loved what Will had to say. And if you guys want to reach out to him and want to know more of how you can get involved in his media company and how to really expand your message, this is definitely a very good person to talk to. And of course, if you guys want to get on podcast with us as Command Your Brand, you can definitely reach out to me at Josh Silvestro at commandyourbrand.com. Definitely find me there. And also you can look up our website, www.commandyourbrand.com. And of course, I'll see you in the next one. And Will, thank you so much for joining me, man.
Oh, it was my pleasure, Josh. Thanks for all you do. And I know people appreciate the conversations you're having. So
absolutely. Awesome. Thank you.